She thought she was calling a lost child's grandmother. She was calling the most dangerous man in Montreal, and the moment he picked up, everything changed. The night Hazel Sinclair found the little boy, it was snowing. Not the pretty kind of snow you see in Christmas films. The kind that makes postcards look like lies. This was February in Montreal, the kind of cold that gets into your jaw and stays there, the kind that makes the salt on St. Catherine Street smell like rust. Hazel had just finished a double shift at Brasserie Clement, a mid-range French bistro on the edge of the plateau, and her feet were the kind of tired that no amount of Epsom salts would fix. She was 22 years old. She had $43 in her checking account, and her landlord had left a third notice under her door that morning. She almost didn't stop. That's the part she would think about for a long time afterward, the moment she almost kept walking. Her bus came at 11:47, and it was 11:42, and she had exactly enough time to make it if she moved quickly. She saw the child from the corner of her eye, a small shape crouched between a newspaper box and the side of a pharmacy, half hidden by a drift of plowed snow. He couldn't have been more than 5 years old. He was wearing a wool coat that was too thin for the temperature and no hat, and he was not crying. He was just sitting very still, the way small children sit when they've gone past the point of fear and into something quieter and more frightening. Hazel stopped. She missed her bus. She would catch the next one in 23 minutes, which meant standing in the cold on a corner that smelled like exhaust and old poutine. But she stopped, crouched down in front of the boy, and said, in the gentle bilingual reflex of someone who grew up in that city, "Hey, sweetheart, are you lost? Tu t'es perdu?" The boy looked up at her. His eyes were dark brown, very serious, with the kind of stillness that children who've learned to be invisible carry with them. He nodded once. "Okay," Hazel said, and even though she was exhausted and cold and financially embarrassed and her feet hurt, she sat down beside him on the sidewalk and said, "Okay, we'll figure it out." His name, it turned out, was Bastien. He was 4, not 5. He had been separated from someone, not a parent, not a mother or father. He kept saying uncle, uncle, somewhere near the Marché Jean Talon. He did not know the phone number. He did not know the address. But there was a phone in the pocket of his too thin coat, a phone much too expensive, an adult for a 4-year-old, locked except for emergency calls and one single contact labeled only. As R. Hazel looked at the contact name, she looked at the boy. She thought, R could be anyone. R could be a grandmother. R could be a kindly aunt. She pressed call. It rang twice. The voice that answered was not a grandmother's. It was low and unhurried and carried the particular quality of a man who has never once in his life been startled by a ringing phone, because in his world, phones only ring when someone wants something from him, and the wanting is always the same. "Who is this?" the voice said. "Not hello? Not hello? Just who is this?" Hazel swallowed. "My name is Hazel Sinclair. I work at a restaurant on St. Catherine. I found a little boy sitting outside in the snow. His name is Bastien, and he says he got separated from his uncle. This phone was in his pocket. You're listed as R, which I realize is not a lot to go on, but..." There was a pause. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. Later, she would replay those 3 seconds many times and try to understand what had changed in them. Because something did change. She could feel it even through the phone, a shift in the quality of the silence, a compression. "Don't move," the voice said. "Don't leave him. Don't go anywhere. I wasn't planning on." The call ended. Hazel looked at the phone. She looked at Bastien. Bastien looked back at her with those dark, serious eyes. "Is your uncle coming?" she asked. "He always comes," Bastien said. As if this were a law of physics. As if it were simply how the world worked. He arrived in 11 minutes, Hazel counted. She'd taken Bastien into the pharmacy to get him out of the cold, bought him a hot chocolate from the machine near the register, using the last of her cash, and was sitting with him on a bench near the blood pressure monitors when the door opened and the temperature in the room changed. That was the only way she could describe it afterward. The temperature changed. The pharmacist behind the counter straightened up. The other customer, a middle-aged woman buying cough medicine, stepped back half a pace without seeming to know she'd done it. The man who walked in was perhaps 40 years old, dark-haired, well-dressed in the way that has nothing to do with brand names and everything to do with fit and posture and the absolute certainty of a man who has never once had to explain himself. He was not large in the obvious way. He was not the kind of man you'd look at and think dangerous if you passed him on the street in daylight. But it was not daylight, and you were not passing him, and the way he scanned the room, quickly, methodically, the way a person clears space before entering it, told you something. If you were paying attention, if you were the type of person who noticed. His eyes found Bastien, and something in his face changed. Not much. A controlled man, clearly. But the line of his jaw softened by maybe 3 degrees, and he crossed the pharmacy in 5 steps, crouched down, and said something to the boy in a voice too low for Hazel to hear. Bastien wrapped his arms around the man's neck. The man stood, holding the boy, and turned to look at Hazel Sinclair. "You're the one who called," he said. "I am," she said. "Raphael Deschênes," he said. It was not an introduction. It was an identification. He said it the way someone states a fact you should already know or will need to know going forward. Hazel did not know the name. She was not, it turned out, the sort of person who followed the crime beat in the Montreal papers, or who paid attention to which family controlled which port contracts, or what the Whisper Network in certain neighborhoods said about the man who'd been running the city's shadow economy since his older brother died 8 years ago and left him a throne he'd spent a decade reinforcing. She knew none of this. She simply knew that the man holding the 4-year-old boy in the middle of a Plateau Mont Royal pharmacy at midnight was looking at her in a way that no one had looked at her in a very long time, with complete, undivided, assessing attention. "Thank you," he said. "He was cold," Hazel said. Anyone would have stopped. Raphael Deschênes looked at her for a moment. "No," he said quietly. "They wouldn't." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. Hazel, who was a practical woman and not proud about it when the situation called for practicality, braced herself to accept whatever he was about to offer. Money. Fine. She had $43 and a landlord who was losing his patience. But what he pulled out was a card. Plain, cream-colored, with a single phone number. "If you ever need something," he said. Hazel looked at the card. She looked at him. "I'm okay," she said. He placed the card on the bench beside her anyway. "Keep it." Then he walked out with Bastien, and the temperature in the pharmacy returned to normal, and the pharmacist exhaled, and the woman with the cough medicine found her feet again. Hazel picked up the card. She put it in her jacket pocket. She told herself she would throw it away in the morning. She didn't throw it away. She didn't use it either. For 6 weeks, she moved through her life, the double shifts at Brasserie Clement, the late buses, the $43 that became 61 and then 37 and then 80, because tips in February are inconsistent and Hazel had learned to ride those waves. She thought about the card sometimes. She thought about the man's voice on the phone, the way he'd said, "Don't move," like it was simply inconceivable that she would do anything else. She thought about the way Bastien had said he always comes. Not with hope, but with certainty, with the absolute faith of a child who has never once been let down by the person responsible for his safety. She thought, that must be something. To be that person for someone. She was not that person for anyone, currently. She was a 22-year-old from Verdun with an incomplete degree in nutrition she'd had to abandon when her mother's medical costs got too high. Working a restaurant job that paid $15.50 an hour plus tips, living in a 1.5 in Rosemont that had a crack in the kitchen ceiling she'd been meaning to mention to her landlord for 3 months. Her mother, Paulette Sinclair, was in a long-term care facility on the South Shore, 4 bus transfers away, and Hazel visited every Sunday without exception. Her mother called her by the right name about 60% of the time now. The facility cost more than Hazel's rent. The gap between what the provincial plan covered and what the facility actually charged was a number Hazel knew by heart, the way you know a bruise. You don't have to look at it to know exactly where it is. She was not asking for sympathy. She was just explaining why, 6 weeks and 4 days after a man named Raphael Deschênes left her a card she should have thrown away, she made the call. Not for herself. That's important. It was not for herself. It was for Océane. Océane Tran was 16 years old and she worked as a busser at Brasserie Clement on Thursday and Friday nights, and she was, without qualification, the brightest 16-year-old Hazel had ever met. Océane wanted to study medicine, Ocean had the grades for it. Ocean also had a father who was 3 months behind on rent, in a building whose landlord had, it turned out, some connection to a development company that was quietly converting half of Hochelaga into condos, and the family's eviction notice had arrived on a Tuesday, and the hearing was in 9 days, and the free clinic where Ocean's mother worked as a receptionist had given them the number of a legal aid organization that had a 6-week wait list. 9 days, 6-week wait list. Hazel did the math. She pulled out the card. She made the call. The same voice answered on the second ring. Hazel Sinclair, Raphael Deschaines said. Not a question. She paused. You saved my number. I save all numbers, he said. It was not a warm thing to say. It was simply accurate. What do you need? Hazel told him. She was direct about it, because she'd learned that directness was a courtesy, and because she had a feeling that Raphael Deschaines had very little patience for people who buried the point. She told him about Ocean, about the eviction, about the 9 days, about the development company. She did not say please. She said, this is the situation, this is what I'm asking. I understand if it's outside what you meant when you said you owed me something. There was a pause. What's the development company? He said. She told him. Another pause, shorter. I know who owns it, he said. I thought you might, she said. I'll make a call, he said. The hearing will be postponed. Ocean's family will have time to find proper representation. Thank you, Hazel said. Don't thank me, he said. We're even now. She almost said fine, yes, of course. She almost said right. Thank you, goodbye. She had her mouth open to say exactly that. Instead, she said, were we keeping score? There was a pause that felt different from the other pauses. No, Raphael Deschaines said. I suppose we weren't. She didn't hear from him for another 3 weeks. And then she did, and it was not what she expected. It was 11 in the morning on a Sunday, her one day off, and she was on the 747 bus headed for the South Shore to visit her mother when her phone rang with an unknown number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She was carrying a bag with a container of her mother's favorite maple pear tart that she'd made the night before, and she was tired, and she wanted to sit with her headphones in and watch the city go by. She answered. I need your help, said Raphael Deschaines. His voice was different, not different in a way that was easy to name. Still controlled, still low, still the voice of a man who does not misplace his composure, but there was something underneath it, a seam showing. What happened? She said. Not a question. Bastien is in the hospital. A pause. He was at a birthday party yesterday afternoon. He became ill on the way home. They are saying. Another pause, and this one was longer, and she understood that the pause was doing work, that the pause was where all the things he would not say in any other context were being held. They are saying it may not have been accidental. Hazel sat very still on the bus. Outside the window, Montreal moved past her. Which hospital? She said. Hôpital Saint-Justine. But I'm not asking you to come, I'm asking. He stopped. Started again. The party was catered. I need to know what they served him. The doctors need a complete list, and the catering company is not cooperating. Another pause. I'm handling the catering company separately, but I need someone who understands food, who knows what to ask, who can read a kitchen inventory and understand what they're looking at. 2 years of nutrition school, 4 years of working professional kitchens. Hazel understood what to ask. Send me the name of the catering company, she said. Hazel, send me the name. He sent it. She got off at the next stop, transferred, and went to the hospital instead of the South Shore. She texted her mother's facility to let them know she'd come next Sunday instead. Her mother, who was having a clear day, texted back a string of hearts and one inexplicable emoji of a cactus, which Hazel took as a blessing. Saint-Justine smelled the way all children's hospitals smell. Antiseptic and crayon wax, and the particular exhausted grief of parents who have been sitting in plastic chairs for too long. Hazel found the right floor, gave her name at the nursing station, and was shown to a waiting area outside a room whose window had the blinds drawn. Raphael Deschaines was in the hallway. He looked like a man who had not slept. He was still impeccably dressed. She suspected he was physically incapable of appearing disheveled. But there were shadows under his eyes and a quality to his stillness that was different from his usual stillness. His usual stillness was controlled. This was the stillness of a person holding something very carefully, afraid that if they move it might break. He looked up when she came around the corner. Something in his face shifted. "You came," he said. "You asked," she said. She sat down beside him, and he handed her a folder, printed emails, an event contract, a menu. She went through it methodically, the way she'd been trained, the way she'd done inventory checks in professional kitchens for 4 years. She made notes on her phone. She asked him 3 questions about the timeline. When did Bastien eat? When did symptoms begin? When did they call the ambulance? Then she looked up. "He's allergic to sesame," she said. Raphael looked at her. "He has no known allergies." "He does now," she said, "or he's developed one. First anaphylactic events can happen with no prior history. Look at the menu. There's a hummus station listed, and 3 dessert items with tahini, and none of it is marked on the allergy disclosure form they gave the host family. That's a liability. That's also potentially what you're dealing with." Raphael Deschaines stared at her for a long moment. "It may not be a poisoning," she said. "It may be a catering company that was negligent about allergen disclosure. Those are 2 very different things." The quality of his stillness changed. Some of the held carefully tension went out of him, replaced by something she couldn't name. Not relief, not quite. Something that lived in the same neighborhood as relief. "I need to call the doctors," he said quietly. "You do," she said. He stood, took 3 steps away, and made a call. She sat in the hallway of the children's hospital and listened to him speak in rapid, low French to someone on the other end, watched him give the allergy information, watched the tension in his shoulders change shape from catastrophe to problem to solve. He came back and sat beside her. They didn't speak for a while. The hallway had the particular ambient noise of hospitals, the soft machinery of care, footsteps, someone's trolley with a squeaking wheel somewhere 2 floors up. "If you'd told me it was deliberate," she said finally, "and I'd been wrong, you would have been right to tell me what you found," he said. "However it turned out." He paused. "How did you know to look at allergens?" "Because I've worked in kitchens," she said, "and because the first thing you look for when a child gets sick at a catered event isn't poison. It's disclosure failures. They happen constantly. Caterers skip the paperwork, the host doesn't ask, and a kid ends up in an ambulance." She looked at her hands. "I've seen it. Not to this degree, but I've seen it." "Where do you work?" he said. It was the first time he'd asked. "Brasserie Clement," she said. "Hostess and server. I'm also the one who rewrote their allergen menu last year because the previous one hadn't been updated in 4 years." He looked at her. "Brasserie Clement has an allergen menu now?" he said. "They do," she said. "It's laminated. I'm quite proud of it." There was a pause, and this was something she would also think about for a long time afterward. Raphael Deschaines made a sound that was almost, not quite, but almost a laugh. Bastien was going to be fine. The doctors confirmed it that afternoon. An anaphylactic reaction, managed in time, the epinephrine had done its job. He was stable and irritable and demanding a particular cartoon that the hospital's streaming situation couldn't accommodate, which Hazel solved by handing a nurse her personal Netflix password, with the instruction to not judge her reality TV choices. Raphael Deschaines came back out of the room and found her still sitting in the hallway, because she'd had nowhere pressing to be, and it had seemed wrong to leave before she knew the boy was all right. "He wants to know if the lady from the pharmacy is here," Raphael said. Hazel blinked. "He remembered me? He remembers everything," Raphael said. There was something in his voice when he said it, quiet and complicated, the way people sound when they love something fiercely and are aware of how much there is to lose. She went in. Bastien was small against the hospital pillows, with an IV in his hand and the particular dignity of a 4-year-old who is managing a situation. He looked at her. He said, "You bought me the hot chocolate." "I did," she said. "It was good," he said seriously. "It was from a machine," she said equally seriously. "But I'm glad." He considered this. Then he said, "Are you going to be around?" Hazel looked at him. She looked at Raphael Deschaines, standing in the doorway of the hospital room, with his arms crossed, and his face doing the controlled thing it always did, except that something was different about it. When he was looking at his nephew, some private softness under the surface. "I don't know," she said honestly. Bastien appeared to accept this as a reasonable answer. He held out his hand, which still had the IV taped to it, and Hazel carefully shook it. Deal, he said, as if they'd agreed to something she hadn't quite heard. The trouble came 3 weeks later, and it came for her. She arrived at work on a Wednesday evening to find a man she didn't recognize sitting at the bar, not drinking, just sitting, watching the room with the particular stillness of someone who has been paid to observe. He was gone by the time she'd changed and come back out, but she noticed the absence of him in the way you notice a space where something was. The next morning, walking home from a late shift, she had the feeling of being followed. She'd grown up in Verdun. She knew the difference between urban night paranoia and something actual. This was something actual. Footsteps that stopped when hers did, a car idling too long at a corner, the same face at the dépanneur she'd passed the day before. She told herself it was nothing. The third time, it wasn't nothing. She was walking home from the bus stop at midnight when a car pulled alongside her slowly, a dark gray sedan, plates she didn't have time to read, and a man leaned out the window and said her name. Said it with the particular ownership of someone who has been told to say it, not someone who knows her. She ran. She made it into her building. She locked the door and stood in her kitchen, and her hands were shaking, which she hated, and she thought about the crack in the ceiling and her $43 and her mother on the South Shore and a man named Raphael Deschaines, who had left her a card and said, "If you ever need something." She picked up her phone. He answered on the first ring. "Someone knows my name," she said. "I don't know what I did, but they know my name." There was no pause this time. "Pack what you need for a week," he said. "I'm sending someone right now." "I don't, Hazel." His voice had changed. The controlled quality was still there, but underneath it was something absolute, the kind of certainty that isn't performed. "You came when I asked you to come. You found what you found. I will not let anything happen to you. Pack what you need. Someone will be there in 7 minutes." She packed what she needed. Someone was there in 6. She stayed in a safe house in Westmount for 4 days. It was a brownstone with good windows and a kitchen that had better equipment than her restaurant, and the man who brought her there, who introduced himself as Eric, and who spoke almost exclusively in monosyllables, made her very good coffee every morning without being asked. On the second day, Raphael came. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and told her what she had stumbled into by existing at the edge of his world. There were people, a rival organization, a man named Gustave Bonhomme who'd been trying to claw back territory in the eastern boroughs for 18 months, who had noticed her, not because of anything she'd done, because of what she represented, a point of vulnerability. Something Raphael Deschaines, who did not typically have points of vulnerability, appeared to have acquired. "I made you a target," he said, "by accepting your help, by letting you come to the hospital." He said it flatly, the way someone states a mistake they have already catalogued and accepted. "That was my error." Hazel looked at him across the table. "You didn't make me a target," she said. "You made me connected. Those are different things." He looked at her. "A target is something someone shoots at," she said. "A connection is something with weight on both sides. I'm part of this now because I made choices. The hot chocolate, the allergen menu, the call at midnight." She paused. "I'm not asking you to feel bad about that. I feel." He stopped. Started again. "I am not accustomed to feeling responsible for other people's safety outside of a very specific circle." "Get accustomed to it," she said, not unkindly. The look he gave her was hard to read. It had several things in it simultaneously: surprise, and something cautious, and something that might have been, in different lighting, relief. Gustave Bonhomme made 2 more attempts. Both of them failed, because Raphael Deschaines was very good at his job, and because Hazel Sinclair turned out to be someone who, when told to stay left, went right, and when told not to open certain doors, noted which doors they were, and kept the information in case it became useful. On the night the 3rd attempt was going to happen but didn't, because Hazel had noticed something about the schedule of a delivery truck outside her building that didn't match the actual delivery schedule of any company in that neighborhood, and had called Eric, who had called Raphael, who had handled it in a way she was not given full details about and chose not to pursue. On that night, Raphael came to the brownstone and sat in the kitchen, and did not speak for almost 10 minutes. She made him coffee. She sat across from him. She waited. "He won't try again," Raphael said finally. "Good," she said. You can go back to your apartment, he said. Or I can arrange. I'll go back to my apartment, she said. I've been watering my plants by phone. Eric calls them in to a neighbor, but the neighbor is not very attentive. He looked at her. Hazel, he said, and then he stopped. She had learned, in the weeks of all of this, that when Raphael Deschaines stopped mid-sentence, it was because he was choosing between two versions of what he was about to say, and that it was worth waiting for the second one. She waited. I am not a good candidate for, he said. My life is what it is. Bastien is the center of it and the only soft thing I allow. I am aware that that is not. He stopped again. What I am offering, he said very carefully, is something I am not sure I know how to offer. I am not practiced at it. I'm likely to be poor at it initially. Hazel looked at him for a long moment. You came in 11 minutes, she said. He looked at her. In the snow, in February at midnight, she said. You came in 11 minutes. Bastien said you always come. That's not someone who doesn't know how to offer things. That's someone who knows exactly what it costs and does it anyway. She paused. I'm not asking for practiced. I'm asking for real. Raphael Deschaines looked at her across the kitchen table of the Westmount brownstone, with the winter outside the window and the particular quiet of a city that is very large and full of lives that will never intersect. And something in his face did the thing that controlled faces do when they finally stop. Then real, he said, is what you'll have. On a Sunday 3 weeks later, Hazel took the bus to the South Shore to visit her mother. She carried the maple pear tart she'd meant to bring 6 weeks ago, the one that had been rerouted by a hospital and a catering list, and a car idling too long at a corner. Her mother was having a clear day. She called Hazel by her right name. She held her hands and said, You look different. You look like you're not alone. Hazel thought about a 4-year-old boy shaking her hand in a hospital bed and saying deal as if they'd agreed to something she hadn't quite caught. She thought about a man who came in 11 minutes and always came and was learning, slowly, carefully, against every instinct he had, to let someone in from outside the very small circle of what he allowed himself. She thought, Bastien was right. There was a deal. She just hadn't heard all the terms yet, but she wasn't afraid of not knowing. She'd stopped at a kid in the snow in February when she had a bus to catch, and $43 in her account, and every reason in the world to keep walking. If she'd learned anything in this city, in this life, it was that the most important things always happen when you stop. If this story got your heart going, you are not alone, and neither is Hazel. Drop a comment and tell us, would you have stopped for Bastien that night? And if you're new to Ella's Romance Library, welcome. Hit subscribe and come back every week, because the stories only get more complicated from here.